Welcome back as we continue with question time to the President in the National Assembly. Our next question comes from Letsau Diale of the ANC and deals with the recent Marikana tragedy. He asked if government was still on course on the issue of social cohesion and nation building. Mr. Diale also wanted to know what lessons had been learned from the Marikana tragedy to ensure that a similar tragedy will not happen again. President Zuma said the social cohesion and nation building program was still on track, but the tragedy should be strengthened by what had happened at Marikana. Meanwhile, the Commission of Inquiry into the tragedy is now getting ready to begin with its investigation.
The tragedy has further highlighted the deepening levels of poverty, unemployment and inequality in our country and the frustrations that this generates. The reminder from the Marikane tragedy is that meaningful social cohesion will be achieved when we succeed in addressing socio-economic inequality, poverty and unemployment. Our economy must grow and create more jobs to absorb the many unemployed and improve the standards of living.
Another lesson from Marikana was the need to accelerate the transformation of the mining sector and to strengthen the sector that had been the backbone of the economy for more than a century. It provided more than 500,000 direct jobs and a similar number of indirect jobs. It was central to the country's development goals. He warned that intimidation and incitement of workers will not help to solve the problem.
We should work together as government, labor, business, political parties, and all stakeholders to promote the adherence to the Constitution and laws of the land in dealing with labor disputes in the mining sector. The worker demands for better wages can and should be addressed within the country's labor relations framework. The illegal strikes, the incitement and intimidation will not assist workers. Instead, it will make them and the country worse off. The Department of Labor and institutions under its control, such as the CCMA, stand ready to assist in mediating between the parties. Government is also continuously engaging mining companies to assess the implementation of the provisions of the mining charter to improve living conditions of workers. In terms of the charter, companies are required to implement measures to improve the standard of housing and living conditions for mine workers.
The first follow-up question came from Mr. Joseph Silau of the ANC. He said the ANC remained committed to nation building. It welcomed the speedy establishment of a judicial commission of inquiry into the tragedy at Marikana.
The ANC further supports the freedom of association and the right to strike by workers, legally as it is enshrined in the Constitution of our country, but we condemn violence and intimidation at all costs during these strikes. The question is, Honorable President, is it not only proper for all of us to wait for the outcome of the inquiry instead of preempting?
I think it is very proper that we should wait for the Commission of Inquiry. It is absolutely important to note that a very big tragedy happened. And we don't know the actual details. And it is important, therefore, to wait for the Commission to establish facts, and the Commission must give a report and recommendations. I think it is then that we can debate the matters from an informed position. I think that's the only correct way to do. If in the country we say, let us find a solution to a problem, and whilst we are searching for the facts, we begin to make our own comments that are in fact judgment about what has happened, I don't think it assists this country going forward. So I totally agree. If we could be patient and wait for the results of the commission, it would be the correct thing for us to do.
Another follow-up question came from Alfred Khanare of COPE, who thought the president should take responsibility for the activities of Julius Malema. He also thought the president had no right to blame Lonmin for failing to deliver houses for its workers.
Most of us in this house acknowledge that Mr. Malema is a Polokwane political Frankenstein created by yourself in order to achieve your objective to become the president. And now, like all Frankensteins, he is uncontrollable and is perceived to be a threat to the security of the country, to a point that your Minister of Defense, who has now unconstitutionally put the army on high alert, feels jittery. Does this mean that in the eyes of government, Mr. Malema's activities can be equated to planning a coup d'etat? Also, Mr. President, can you explain why you and your government blame Lonmin for not providing housing for minors, while lack of housing and basic services is a serious problem all over South Africa as a result of the ANC's failure to deliver?
I've produced no person, as it is claimed, for Polokwane, not at all. So I shouldn't be blamed for somebody who has some characteristic of his own. It's not my fault. I never participated in the production of that person. Because I think you should not make a mistake of ANC members who behave in a particular way at a particular time for very specific reasons, and then say if they behave in that way, they've been created by others. ANC is a very democratic organization. People have different views. They also have views about the preferences of the leaders who must lead them. Now, if somebody has preference for a particular leader, it doesn't mean that that leader has created that person, because they are exercising democratically. You should know this. Have you forgotten? Just a few years. With regard to the conditions in the mines, I think it would be a mistake to compare what government is doing and what the mines have been doing over the centuries. I think it would be an unfair comparison. Conditions in the mines have been terrible all the time, as a specific area that is owned by companies, not by government. You also know that the question of the housing for the majority of this country in the previous governments was also horrible. We are addressing that legacy insofar as the country is concerned. To suggest that it is the ANC that is not giving people houses, as if the ANC, once it came to government, it dispossessed people, and therefore it is his problem now to give people houses, instead of appreciating that the ANC, ever since it came in, it has programs, it has built houses, but you could not resolve that issue overnight, because it is a huge issue of centuries.
At the moment, the current labor relations regime states that union representation thresholds must be set at 51%, which led to a situation where AMCU was not a recognized union at the Lonmin mine, and AMCU was therefore excluded from wage negotiations, empowering the ANC-affiliated NUM to establish a monopoly at the mine. Mr. Speaker, my question is about labor negotiations and relations in general, which is critical to social cohesion. Does the President believe that smaller unions should be empowered to negotiate on behalf of their members and not be excluded by big unions like NUM in a winner-takes-all scenario?
In a democratic situation, it is the majority that prevails. Now, you can't change the rules because you want to make a particular point. You can't then say smaller unions must then be compared to the bigger unions the same way. Exactly. That's why you sit in that bench all the time. You can't move this side. You can't. Impossible. You can't. No. I'm telling you, you should appreciate that. We are in parliament, political parties. We are not workers. I'm talking about what governs the unions. They are workers, all of them are working. Workers who do not join the unions can't have the same kind of privileges. Of course, they might benefit if those in majority, those who are unionized, win the gains in the negotiations. But they can't be the same. You can't have a union of half a dozen people. Because you have declared it a union, you must have the same rights. It can't be. Sorry?
Order, honourable members.
We have more rights here because we are a majority. You have lesser rights because you are a minority. That's how democracy works.
We have to leave it right there. Our time is up. We'll come back to that question on Monday when we look at more questions to the President. Enjoy your weekend, and until next week, goodbye.